I knew that 3 to 5 years after I walked out the door, it would be questionable as to the sustainability of that program. Consultancy company was happy, they were being paid. I felt, excuse the expression, a prostitute in the system, because I knew that it wasn't going to be sustainable. So my fascination around companies who spend a shitload of money on trainings, on coaches, on workshops, on change programs for very questionable ROI, return on investment back into the business. So when September 11th hit, that was my wake-up call. I was relocating the program office from from the Netherlands to Boston, which was no mean easy feat. And I really questioned, you know, what I was doing. Loved what I was doing, but when you're the one in there implementing the change, you know, to the extent of shutting down multi-billion-dollar projects, you're not popular because, you know, thousands of people are being made redundant. So being a change agent, which I think anybody in the transformative field are, you know, you learn early on how to navigate a lot of perplexities of personality. So I came back to New Zealand and started exploring this whole elusive thing called sustainability. So that was from a corporate perspective. Personally, I'd been a course junkie, name a book, a CD, a course, read it, listened to it, went to it, struggled to sustain the change. So you can be as highly trained as you like. It's like the gym membership, you know, buy the gym membership, you got to get your sorry ass to the gym. The application of the knowledge is the other thing. So of all of the leadership service providers out there, of all of the coaches out there, the lane that I stay in and specialize in, and there's no other leadership service provider in the marketplace focusing on this element, is how do you sustain change both personally and professionally? So the basis of what I'm going to be talking today is about the sustainability element, and how do you achieve the results outside of what you're currently experiencing. So that's a bit of background. So do you want to get into it? Yes, we do. Okay, I'm going to share my screen.
Hell yeah. Bring it on.
Be with me, people. That's my husband, if anybody's wondering what the hell that is. And,
hey, Rob.
Yeah. Alrighty, so I thought I'd just explain first of all how I differentiate. So this is no disrespect to any other leadership service providers out there, anybody in the coaching or professional psychiatric field. I'm just wanting to explain what I don't do and where I do specialize, because I have a lot of respect for anybody in the transformative field. So first of all, psychotherapy is a long process and a deep process. There is a time for that. And when you look at counseling, I'm only talking about the dysfunctional aspect of counseling. That's quite a long process and quite a shallow process. I've got a bit of an issue with somebody who's seen a counselor for 2, 5, or 10 years, still dragging out their story and paying for the privilege of it. You've got the rah-rah seminars that get that short shot of euphoria, feel great for a while, and then back into same old, same old. They're actually designed for you to keep going back. And so where I position the education that I've developed is that it's a short process, but a deep process. And part of my passion is to be able to make a difference with the field of counseling and psychotherapy. I specialize, which I'll talk into today, what I call the default disempowered identity, or your default blueprint, which we'll talk about today, because that's the thing that's hindering you from being able to achieve results outside the realm of what you've currently experienced. And it's also the reason why you're unable to sustain the change. So that's just a quick overview of how I differentiate. It's a deep process and a short process. People are wanting results. If you're going to invest money into change, let's make sure it's sustainable. I led a 3-day leadership retreat for 10 months of the year for 10 years. I attracted a cross-section of leaders from all around the world. So it was a pretty good research study over 10 years. People who've tried everything, the Lamarcks, the Avatars, the Anthony Robbins, all fantastic education. However, for whatever reason, they didn't achieve the level of transformation that they'd wanted, nor did they know how to sustain it, which is where I came in. So being able to explain to people what's in the way, even when you know half the time we have a mechanism where we sabotage. So we're going to touch on that today as well. Secondly, again, from an explanation standpoint, I use the three-legged stool analogy, especially where leadership is concerned. First leg of the stool is traditional leadership. Most leaders are unconsciously competent in their field of expertise. They've done the leadership retreats, the leadership trainings. They are unconsciously competent. Unconscious competency, 15-year-old getting in the car, it's all a bit clunky. Get in your car now, you don't even think about it. You've moved from unconscious incompetency to unconscious competency. So that leg is very, very solid. Second leg of the stool is your subject matter expertise. If you've achieved a level of seniority within your leadership position, you are a subject matter expert, hence the reason why you've got the position. So that leg is very, very solid. The third leg of the stool, which is where I come in, is the right brain, the so-called soft skills, which is so not soft, the belief, behavioral, cultural change, the mindset side of things to shift the stinking thinking. That leg of the stool, usually from a corporate perspective, is when we've got the time, when we've got the money, which is hardly ever, is the weakest leg of the stool. So the area that I specialize in is the third leg of the stool, to be able to complement the other two legs. Again, this is just purely from an explanation standpoint. Now, people, moment by moment by moment, we're in one of two states. We're either in an empowered state or a disempowered state. I stay away from positivity and negativity because half the time, you know, when you're trying to be positive, it kind of like just doesn't cut it. Using the terminology of empowerment and disempowerment, from that perspective, it's more experiential than analytical. So the transformational curve, language, so I'm a dangerous woman to talk to. Language, I'm a coach to cause, not symptom. Because if you deal with the cause, then the symptoms don't keep showing up. So in this diagram, you are either operating at a high level of consciousness or a lower level of consciousness. You can never have a low moment, a bad day, or view something as wrong if you're connected. And most people lead, a high percentage of people who are disempowered lead a disconnected life. All of human suffering is a function of what we make things mean. So part of the work that I do is be able to raise people's consciousness such that they are the observer of what is without making it mean anything, not how it could have been, should have been, or wanted it to be. The art of equanimity is the ability to be the observer. You cannot put a dollar value on that with reference to your leadership ability and or your humanistic ability from that perspective. So again, in this diagram, I'm just wanting to explain we are operating at two different levels of awareness. Bottom level is what I term 1 to 3 dimensional thinking, which is the realm of meaning, because most people are disconnected. When you think about anxiety, pressure, overwhelm, any disempowered feeling is a function of being disconnected, feeding past and or future-based projections. And part of the work is being able to collapse those projections and come back into the now moment. So again, that's just explaining the different levels of awareness. But the core document that I'm wanting to take you through today, which is the basis of my education, is the transformational journey to self-mastery. There is a journey of a transformative nature to master oneself, and would love to be able to walk you through this today. I might just check in with you there, EJ. Are you hearing all of this? Are we all good to go? Hello, hello.
We are great, and there's lots of people already saying we've all had ear pricks around your comment of coach to cause, not symptom, and people on Facebook land are also liking that. We've got people saying default, yes, an agent of change should never have a desire to please, and thank you for bringing Sally as part of the summit. So people are loving it, and we're loving this model.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
Julian's saying can hear you clearly, which is great. So looking forward to you unpacking this. Is there is it possible for us to share this later in the Facebook group as a PDF?
You can share any of this. Yep, all go. Anything that raises the awareness would be fantastic. And if you want to interject with me at any stage, EJ, and ask me any questions, feel free to do so.
Fantastic. Thanks, Sally.
Brilliant. Okay, good. So I'm not too sure whether it's your left or my right, but on the left-hand side for me, people operate at a lower level of consciousness where it's limited. And default-based world is somebody who's disempowered triggering somebody else that's disempowered, and it's a default-based world. So I'll use the languaging of default throughout this presentation, which means your disempowered state. That's in the known world as a human being. This model is quite linked to the hero's journey, 12 stages of transformation. We're born intuitive, limitless, and fearless, connected. Kids don't really have an issue with uncertainty. They're just in the beingness state. And then from about the ages of 3 to 5, we learn to separate from the unknown realm, and we create our belief and behaviors and the structures and the culture, how we dress, where we live, who we marry, our worldview, and then the results are produced from that. So a number of people have often said to me, Sally, you brainwash people. I go, yeah, I do, from a positive perspective, because regardless of whether you've had a good childhood or not, everything stems from childhood. Sorry, comes with the territory. So working with CEOs, which is where I specialize, around that aspect is always interesting. Why on earth, Sally, have you come into my organization, you're talking to me about my childhood? Well, and we're going to elaborate on that in this session, because your belief in your behaviors and how you operate, are stem from that. So when I talk about the default, it's from that programming, from that worldview. And usually default doesn't work. It doesn't work with your own default mechanism, Inner Critic. that voice that beats the crap out of you. And it also doesn't work when you're engaging with somebody else who's in their default. So part of what I teach people is the power-based interaction, which I'll speak into in this diagram. So this is living in past or future-based projections. All of human dysfunction lies in being disconnected, feeding either a past-based negative projection or a future-based negative projection. My issue with depression, having partnered many people off depression drugs in a sustainable way, I'm a threat to the pharmaceutical industry because I like to be able to have people be able to get off drugs and be able to function in their life and achieve what it is that they want and understand what it is that's going on. Confusion is the biggest strategy from the default. How convenient you're confused, you don't have to take responsibility. So past and future-based projections are the access point to why there is dysfunction in your life. So leading people to the cliff face, hence the book, Free for Living Life Beyond the Edge, bringing people to the cliff face to actually look at and view things differently. This is in the world of meaning. I'm talking about default-based meaning. People are walking meaning-based machines. They're disconnected, hanging out in their heads, which is where all this thinking and thinking happens. So if you look at the central model, on that side of the equation, this is what I call 1 to 3 dimensional thinking, which is where all of human suffering is a function of. So I work with Matt Church, one of the top leading thought leaders in Australia. He runs Global Thought Leaders, mentored me for 2 to 3 years. He asked me to, how do I articulate my education in one hit? This was a doodle on an airplane, on a napkin, and it's evolved from there. But how do I explain everything that I do in one hit, which is what this diagram's about. So if you're wanting to change, that's one thing, but you're wanting to transition out of where you're operating. You're wanting to experience some level of transformation. You can go beyond that and experience some level of transcendence, which is where I dance. So if you look at the first quadrant, how do you, what I love about this model, it may be viewed as complex, but I love bringing simplicity to complexity. So to me, I'm wanting to break it down, unpack it so that people can understand what's in the way of them being able to achieve what it is that they want. So if somebody isn't transitioning out of where they're operating, first quadrant, orange quadrant, it is a function of not being aware, not being responsible, and not getting present to the cost. Hence the reason why they can't transition. So the 3 elements on each of the quadrants are the only 3 elements. In my arrogance, I'll own it, having coached thousands of people, proven it. That's the reason why. You can be an alcoholic, for example. You understand the carnage that you've created. You're aware of the carnage, but you're unwilling to take responsibility. You're certainly not present to the cost, hence the reason why you can't transition. So partnering people in becoming aware, learning to take responsibility. My reframer for responsibility is your ability to respond differently based on your awareness, based on what it is that you're committed to, and getting present to the cost. In the study of ontology.
So Sally, we've had someone ask, how do you get rid of the stinking thinking?
That's later in the presentation. So if you can remind me before we finish, I just want to explain the context of this and then I can get into that.
Absolutely.
It's one diagram that will make sure that we cover off on how do you shift any inner critic conversation and how do you shift any disempowered feeling, depression, anxiety, overwhelm. One process nails both. So we'll make sure we cover that off today and hope you find that of benefit. So costs, when you talk about the study of ontology, the study of what it is to be human, there are a number of ontological payoffs that you get out of not changing. So you get to be right, you get to make others wrong, you get to be justified about your point of view, you get to be a victim, powerless to change the situation, you get to dominate, manipulate, and control. Cool, baby. So if you're human, those are the reasons why you stay in a dysfunctional state. There's a lot of payoffs to that, but you're not present to what it's costing you. You can rattle off the cost, but you're not present to the cost, because if you were, you'd move in a heartbeat. So this is a learning phase. You accept that there could be a new possibility, and you define who you are in that new possibility to be able to transition. Second phase, a high percentage of people live in this domain. They're used to taking action. They apply what they know to a point. They're more of an observer. They have done the courses. They say that they're committed. Big difference between wanting something and being committed to something. You can hear that in people's language. But for whatever reason, they haven't experienced the level of transformation that they wanted, nor do they know how to sustain it, which is where I come in. And the only reason, in my arrogant opinion, is because they don't apply what they know beyond their default identity. And why is that? Because they don't have enough understanding of what their default identity is, which again, we're going to cover off in today's presentation. Okay, so that's 1 to 3 dimensional thinking. On the right-hand side is where I dance. My passion is to raise people's consciousness to the realm that is unlimited. have them understand how do you sustain being in your power all the time, regardless of circumstance. To be able to achieve that as a function of understanding this thing called the default disempowered identity. Reaccessing the unknown world, where the magic, the miracles, the zone, synchronistic opportunities are a function of being able to dance with that unknown. The irony of what we're experiencing with COVID and this whole uncertainty realm, that is where I dance. Fall in love with being confronted, fall in love with being resistant, fall in love with you know, that unknown domain, because that's where the magic lies. And if you're a transformation agent, and any of the people that are listening today, if you are in the coaching or consultancy or practitioning field, it is your responsibility to go beyond the norm of what's known. So partnering people to re-access the unknown world as a spiritual being. As I said before, spirituality or faith for me is about trusting the unknown as much as the known. That's it. I don't need to call it anything. You can call it whatever you like. I've coached everybody from every religious sect, spiritual sect, unknown sect, atheist, good converter. We're going to talk about faith in today's presentation, depending on the time. And living in the now moment. There is only the now moment. The past is but a thought. It can't be in your future unless you keep putting it there, and the future is an illusion. It's only a function of what you think in the now moment. But you got to friggin' well be here now. You know, half the time we're not. We're hanging out in these past and future-based projections. So teaching people to access the realm of no meaning, and that is not to say there's a difference between empowered meaning and disempowered meaning. I'm only talking about the context of disempowered meaning, which is a thing that has the drug companies have a ball. You know, the weight loss industry. God, if we had another webinar, is $1 trillion industry. It's not interested in sustainable solutions. So I'm a threat both to that industry as well as the pharmaceutical industry, because I'm interested in people understanding what the hell is going on and getting results in a very fast way, because there's a lot of highly trained people out there not getting the results that they want. So connecting people back into the heart space. And for that to occur, which is where we come into the third quadrant, is the purple zone, which is the healing space. You do not have to have a dysfunctional childhood to experience healing. Healing is a lousy terminology. Most people don't like the word healing, but I talk about healing as one of the main strategies at executive level. I've written a PDF document that explains the benefit of healing at executive level. It's a fun. Every single organization on the planet has human beings in it. I'm sorry, people, I didn't design it, but what comes with the human territory is dysfunction, regardless of how good your childhood was or not. So healing is integral to be able to, if we are to believe that every single individual in the organization has a default identity, there must be a default undercurrent within the organization that's undistinguished. So being able to reassociate people, reintegrate people mentally, spiritually, emotionally, physically, having them become whole and complete is that, and it's an unquantifiable, it's hard to describe, it's an experience. It's not something you can kind of like understand at a head level. So that's where you surrender. Accessing the dark night of the soul is get out of your head and get into your heart, yeah? To be able to transition into transcendence, which is very much where I dance. This is the fourth, fifth, and beyond dimension, being able to access that oneness of being. I know you, AJ, are a prolific meditator. I've been meditating for over 30 years. If people listening today, if you haven't learned how to meditate and you're in leadership, you got to go there. The gold that lies in silence is beyond imaginable. So owning who you are, integrating back into being whole and complete, achieving that level of mastery. The key to self-mastery is not about not getting triggered, it's the length of time you spend in the trigger. So define, share, integrate, become, that's a journey. And you've got a choice. One of the most fundamental basics of any transformative shift is you've got a choice on how you feel, choice on how you respond, choice on what you do. Choice is the biggest distinction on the planet with reference to your state. Right, so any questions before I go on there, AJ?
There's not questions so much as there is just huge amounts of comments. People are really loving this. We've got people saying, yes, the magic lies in the unknown. The politics of organisations is all about the default identity, as is global politics. There was lots of thought bombs going off when we were talking about the weight loss industry and those sorts of things as well. I know what I loved was your whole, you know, raising people's consciousness to the realm of, and you said something that I loved that. And also this concept of healing zone. And I know my work in organizations as well, you have to heal the whole people. You have to heal the individuals as well as the organization. And it has to begin there, where we have to be willing to surrender. And I think every religious, spiritual, yogi, Buddhist, whatever text you ever look at, there was always a dark night of the soul. You know, people always had to be willing. St. John of Cross, you know, everyone has been through that. Paramahansa Yogananda, we have to be willing to face that. And that's why we need coaches like you in the world that are doing great things, helping people go there.
Right back at you, girlfriend. Right back at you. Cool. Okay, good. So I'll continue, because we can do the Q&A at the end if we get through the slides, and then we can get more into the nitty gritty. Cool bananas. Thanks, AJ.
Awesome.
Okay, good. So this diagram for me talks into, so the little P's mean everybody in their power, all the D's mean everybody in their default. I believe a high percentage of organizations on the planet having implemented cultural change. I also specialize in, as a program director, program portfolio and project management, bringing a projectized culture into an organization. In a lot of cases, there is a default-based culture. There is also a disempowered KPI culture. Most people's KPI, key performance indicators. You know, people are not inspired by their KPIs. They feel pressured by their KPIs. So if there's not enough awareness about the individual default identities, then there's a collective default identity running within the organization that isn't spoken into. And so that's quite weighted if you look at the one at the bottom. So being able to create KPI empowered cultures is educating the executive. So I work with the CEO and the executive team to be able to transcend their thinking, to be able to have by osmosis, have that impact the organization as a function of who they are being. You cannot put a dollar value on an executive or a CEO who is able to sustain and maintain their empowered state all the time. I'm interested in educating individuals and collectives on the impact that a lack of awareness has on doing the mindset side of things. So we don't have time today to get into it, but there's 7 layers of the default-based blueprints, and I've created this model. Again, more than happy to share anything that's going to benefit people. This is a process I walk people through to explain to them what's unique about their own default identity, which I call your default blueprint. When you become aware, you can take your power back. As I said before, confusion is the biggest thing that has somebody relinquish responsibility for being able to live and lead an empowered life. So this is the model that I wanted to get into today, conscious of time, is faith. Yes, heaven help us, we're going to talk about faith. So I've coached over 100 coaches in my methodology. I couldn't fulfill on everything, so I had to coach other coaches on how to become coach intuitives and be able to give people an understanding of what's actually happening. So again, apologies for the speed with which I'm delivering this, but just conscious of wanting to pack everything in, because I'm wanting to get to that last slide, which is going to help your listeners on dealing with any disempowered state, any and critic conversation. So faith, the word that I use is co-creation. The ability to be able to co-create with the unknown. I'm unconsciously competent with the unknown. There's no millisecond of my day where I'm not in communication with my faith. I don't need to label it anything. Often people say to me, you know, are you religious? Are you this? Are you that? I go, look, I don't have to be aligned with anything. I just trust the unknown. I just stay there. That being said, as I said, you know, I've coached a cross section of people from so many different beliefs, and I respect what anybody believes. But the difference where I come in is that I'm here to have you walk it versus just talk it, because I'm a fearless practitioner. Another conversation another time as to why. But teaching leaders on how to lead a fearless existence is part of what I'm passionate about. So just really, really quickly, you're either living at a lower level of consciousness or a higher level of consciousness. You're either in your head or you're in your heart. You're either there's no evidence showing up or there's evidence showing up. You're either it's limited or it's unlimited, the potential of what you could create. You're either attached to the known realm or you're attracted to the unknown realm. This is the thing I love. You're either evidence-based, which is a high percentage, who are waiting for evidence to show up before you trust, or you're a possibility faith-based person who you implicitly trust the unknown, and you know that that's the reward of that is going to be the evidence. So how do you transition from the default into your power? First of all, let's just explain what's going on for people. People who are confused about this thing called faith or atheist or whatever, they're either doing confusion or there's complete friggin' resistance. Why is that? Because they distrust. They've found enough evidence to sink a ship that it's not worthy trusting. There's no evidence. It's part of their upbringing. They've got a negative listening of religion. My issue within corporate, when I talk to executives, you mention the word faith, they immediately have a lousy listening of religion. They immediately discount any benefit and then, you know, off the table. So co-creative leadership, co-creation is the most palatable term that I can use to get away with talking about faith, which again is just trusting the unknown as much as the known, to be able to widen the scope on the limitless nature of traditional leadership is dead, you know. There is so much that you can learn in the traditional linear space and COVID-19 has very much highlighted the need to be able to get out of your head and actually think outside the norm. So what that then presents is that there's no evidence and they stay confused, and so there's frustration and there is self-fulfilling prophecy about this whole thing called faith. You know, it's not worth even thinking about. So where I come in is actually, you know, you're either not collecting the winnings or you've won lotto. It's 24/7, it's available, it's free, you can tap into it whenever you like. So especially now, I feel for people who do not have a faith, whatever that is for them, because living on this planet as a human being devoid of faith is a very, very scary space. Being able to have people understand that you can tap in whenever you like. And so part of what I teach people is your intuition is your access point to the unknown. The more that you, one of the chapters in my second book, The Co-Creative Age, The Next Evolutionary Phase in Leadership, I talk about intuition being your most powerful muscle. It is your access point. You're the conduit for information to come through. I'm just a pure channel. That's all I do as a coach intuitive. Throw anything at me, any place, anytime, anywhere, and anything. I listen to your language. The language tells me where I need to go. So following your intuitive voice, asking for help, guidance, and clarification or direction, talking into the ether. Yes, people, it's okay. You start talking, you ask for signs, they'll start talking to you. They, again, not perturbed on what you call them, but you start talking into the ether. It may feel a bit weird if you're new to it, but I tell you what, 24/7, you start talking, they're going to start talking to you. Letting go, surrendering, acting as if through action. Visualization, affirmations, they're great so long as you apply it beyond this default identity I talk about. Belief, when you take action, you start taking action. Give me a sign, you know, give me a sign. You start believing that it could be possible. You find some evidence. You trust that there could be possibility, which reinforces you to find new evidence. The more that you do that, the more that it transitions, the more that you take action, and the whole thing cycles. The key thing here is that if you are a disbeliever of the unknown, of being able to tap into the unknown, it's a function of the evidence that you've found. So evidence-based people are waiting for evidence to show up before you trust. Prove it to me. Well, we're in COVID-19, and if you're staying in the evidence-based space, that's the sad thing, versus being open to a new possibility and partnering people to trust in the unknown, which is where the topic of today's discussion was co-creative leadership. Being able to lead from the co-creative realm, which is unfathomable, limitless. And we accessed that when we were born, and then we lost it from about the age of 3 to 5, and then we became so attached to this known realm. Being able to re-access the unknown realm, which is where the magic and the miracles and all of it happen. So again, I know it was very quick to get through this diagram, but the last slide is the one that I want to focus on. So exponential results, sustainable results, is a function of understanding integrally what your default identity, how it was made up, where it came from, why it's playing out. Its only purpose is safety, dysfunctional safety. It's about keeping you safe, sorry. So the more you can understand it, the more you can take your power back. And that's the area that I specialize in. This diagram here, just really quickly to answer the question that was raised before. One process, again, brings simplicity to complexity. How do you shift any disempowered state? One process. How do you shift any inner critic conversation? One process. This is the process. So again, really quickly, I'll go through it and then we can be open to ask any questions. So let's deal with the inner critic as the first one. So I'm wanting mastery of the inner critic in the schooling system. If I have a 9-year-old child in front of me, they've got a heinous inner critic. I've got a client who's 49 years of age with 4 decades of self-abuse. It's crazy. When was the last time somebody asked you about your inner critic today? It's part of what it is to be human. And so having mastery of the inner critic in the schooling system is a big aim of mine. And it's rife within corporate at leadership level, but nobody talks about it. Reaction. Inner critic says, who the hell do you think you are? Phase 1, you're in reaction. You're reacting to it. Still in phase 1, observing that reaction. Interesting, my inner critic says, who the hell do I think I am? You're just observing it. Second, recognition. Ask one question. What's actually really going on? Take the focus off the inner critic conversation and come back into your power as the adult and ask one question. What's actually really going on? Evaluation. I'm disconnected. What am I feeding? That conversation will either be past-based or future-based, 110% of the time. Usually, who the hell do you think you are comes from the past. Land that. That's all you got to do is land it. Okay, good. So, sensation. What are you more committed to? So you're either, if you're in a disempowered state, 24/7, you are in child mode. If you are in your power, you're in adult mode. So training leaders on how to access their adult state all the time and stop operating from a lot of little boys, little girls running businesses. I can tell you that for free. So sensation, you need to know what you're committed to. You need to know what your game is. You need to know what you're motivated by. These are things, obviously, that we work through. So when you get to sensation, reaccess, because you can either stay disconnected, feeding the projection, which is creating the dysfunction, or you can come back to the now, reaccess being the adult, hook into what you're motivated by, what you're committed to, and then shift your state. If you can't shift your state, you're just getting more out of the ontological payoffs. Get to be right, make them wrong, get to be justified about your point of view, get to dominate, manipulate, control, get to be a victim, powerless to change the situation, versus present to what it's costing you. I'm not saying it's a walk in the park, but awareness-based training, which is what I provide, is a function of you taking responsibility or not. But my thing is, I'm not expecting people to be happy, clappy people. I just want people to totally understand 24/7 what's actually going on. Let's take the same process with depression. I'm triggered, I'm feeling depressed. Interesting, I'm feeling depressed right now. What's actually really going on? Oh, I'm disconnected. That feeling of depression, where's it coming from? Am I projecting out into the future, creating worlds in the worry zone? Worry is creating that which I do not want. Yeah, good on you. Or is it feeding something from the past? It's just a projection. You have a choice on whether you feed it or not. And if you're feeding it, you're getting something out of it versus present to what it's costing you. Evaluating, collapsing that projection, coming back to the now moment, and then being able to shift your reaction. Now, the speed with which you move is the key to self-mastery. The key to self-mastery is not about not getting triggered. It's the length of time you spend in the trigger. A minute, an hour, a day, a week. Some people go to their graves being triggered. So the speed with which you shift is the mastery piece. So this process can be applied to any disempowered feeling. Unconfident. Interesting, I'm feeling unconfident. What's actually really going on? Oh, I'm disconnected, feeding projection. Every single disempowered feeling. Anxiety. Interesting, I'm feeling anxious right now. What's actually really going on? Oh, I'm disconnected, feeding a projection. One process nails the inner critic. One process nails every disempowered feeling. Absolutely bloody will love it. Highly recommend applying it, and open to asking any questions or answering any questions that you have there, AJ.
Hoo-wee. There is so much happening there. Do we need to leave the screen up, or maybe you can stop sharing for a minute, and come back to chatting?
Hello.
All of the groups, you'll see the chats have been going off. Everyone's been connecting with what you're saying. And in Facebook land, there's been loads and loads of comments. People are saying they love this. The key to self-mastery is not about getting triggered. It's about the time you spend in that trigger. I asked people to pop a Y in the chat boxes on both forums if they still feel they have an inner critic, and there was loads, people going yes, 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 yes. So there's a lot of that. Questions? Who has questions for Sally?
I might just quickly speak into that inner critic one.
Yeah.
Hence that's because wanting it in the schooling system, big time. My coaching is very unorthodox, and again, probably not appropriate, but I want people to get results today. So one of the processes I do use with people is I will ask somebody, so if there was a 5-year-old child standing beside you right now, would you berate that child the way you berate yourself most days? And they go, oh God, no. I go, okay, so are you a child abuser? And they sit there going, the unorthodox coach would ask that. And they go, well, what do you mean? What do you mean? I go, well, if you were to take a 3 to 5-year-old photo of yourself, you've been beating up that little girl, little boy for decades. What the hell did you do wrong that warranted that degree of abuse? So you are your own worst child abuser to yourself, and it usually connects people, yeah? My processes are quite unorthodox because I want people to shift. I want people to shift really fast and connect into, man, if you were to view yourself as a child abuser to yourself, yeah, it's just like, what the hell did you do? You didn't do anything wrong. And yet we have this mechanism. It's a safety mechanism. The irony, the inner critic is a safety mechanism. Bloody dysfunctional. I had the worst inner critic 24/7, high volume, couldn't turn the goddamn thing off. So I'm highly trained in the dysfunction of the inner critic, and am now a product of somebody who silenced it. So I didn't experience my inner critic at all. Done the work, fully reintegrated, which is the benefit of healing, and obviously very passionate about being able to impart. You know, there's books out there that say, you know, put a rubber band on your wrist and flick yourself every time you got an inner critic going on as a strategy. I'm going, are you shitting me? Has it not produced enough dysfunction to create more pain? You know, no disrespect. So being able to get people present to what it is that they're doing to themselves. The inner critic is a safety mechanism. It's very dysfunctional. If you use that process, again, it's through repetitive application, understand what's going on. You've got to do the work in the healing domain. Coaching in isolation is not sustainable. Healing in isolation is not sustainable. Two together, bloody formidable.
Awesome. And so we've got a question here from Mark. Thanks for your question, Mark. He's enjoying your energy and power. He says, how much does the inner critic impact who you are and your personality?
Great. So the inner critic annihilates human potential. When you think about every single organization on the planet is a makeup of human beings. Why on earth isn't mastery of the inner critic in the schooling system, given that every single human being within, be it an organization or a household or whatever, everybody has one, but nobody talks about it. When I used to lead these retreats 10 months a year for 10 years, in a group, I would ask them, high-level executives, you know, what are the top 3 to 5 repetitive inner critic conversations that your inner critic's saying to you? Write it all down. And then I'd get them to share in the group, you know, what their inner critics were saying. Well, what it highlighted was we are so vicious to ourselves, and it feeds well into the discussion today. How do you can only achieve certain results from a human form. You can produce limitless results from the co-creative form. To experience that level of co-creativity trains you to be the adult versus the child. Whenever the inner critic is going on as a function of you being in child mode. It's what's unhealed. If you have not silenced your inner critic, or you don't know how, it's a function of being unhealed. And you don't have to have a dysfunctional childhood. Here's a statistic for you. Having coached thousands of people from every variance of life, those that are more dysfunctional are those that have experienced jack shit versus those that are warranted to have achieved, you know, that level of dysfunction, right?
Yeah.
So it's not about the happening by any shape of the imagination. It's what you've done with the happening. So is the inner critic absolutely annihilating? Yes. Why on earth it's not in the schooling system? Because the base belief of every single human being is I'm not good enough. And no bastard's talking about it. Sorry, no disrespect.
Oh, I completely agree. And I think the people who have been through the dark night of the soul are more likely to have faced the inner critic and done some of the work to step into adult. Because often we just see children with inner critics grow up to be parents with inner critics that then turn that on other people. We have some other things also here in Facebook. Lisa was asking the diagram that you said before that we'll share later in the group. Is that something that you work on as a leader for yourself and for your team? Can you work on it with the team?
Without a doubt. So I don't focus on race, creed, color, agenda, position in an organization. If you're human, it just comes with the territory. So I personally specialize from the top down because the fish stinks from the head down, another chapter in the book. And I'm not for everyone. I think you guys have probably gathered that by now. But for those that are wanting to do deep work, who are here making a significant difference on the planet. So any variance of team, I facilitate default-based discussions, which is always very interesting. Say, for example, hypothetically, I'm working with an executive who has an issue with one of their executive team. In group, this is hilarious. I will write 2 little stick figures. I'll put default. I go, what is your lousiest listening, negative default listening of that executive in front of everybody? And the CEO will say, bloody incompetent. I'll go, great, round of applause, and write bloody incompetent. I'll then say to the executive that got an issue with, what's your lousiest listening? You know, we're all here. What's your lousiest listening of the CEO? Go, oh no, I can't say that. No, we've got permission. You know, go for gold. Bloody arsehole. I go, great. Okay, bloody arsehole. Round of applause, right? So default. Bloody incompetent, bloody arsehole. How's it working for you, right? Default doesn't work, right? Now, immediately, I've facilitated this in God knows how many executive teams. Immediately what happens is that the person turns to the person next to them and goes, what's your default listening of me? What's your default listening? And it becomes funny, and then it becomes a conversation, right? Now, what happens is that when you go back into the environment, and that listening will still be there, your negative default listening that you have of your kids, parents, anybody who's close to you, your boss, your work colleagues, there's a negative default listening that we have that nobody's talking about, but it's friggin' well running. Once that's brought into the awareness and we're all okay with it, then the next time that shows up, you can actually have a conversation. I'm listening to you as bloody incompetent right now. I'm not wanting to listen to you from that space. Can we have a different level of conversation? So that then it becomes something that they can work with, and not dramatic, rather than this undercurrent that no boss is talking about.
Yes, and you can probably see here in the chat box, Eve said, amazing, cannot believe you've answered my question to myself, although I have the tools, I've never been able to move forward. Thank you. Quick turnaround. Oh, a little bit unstable on the internet. Pat's saying people today are grief illiterate, and that's part of the lack of healing. Any comments on that, Sally?
Yeah. So look, I'm the first one to say that healing has a lousy listening and connotation in the marketplace. So you try and use that terminology in corporate land, it doesn't land, it lands like cup cold sick actually. And Pat, you know, you specialize in the area of grief. A lot of people have unhealed issues on whatever level that is relevant for them, be that from their childhood or, you know, loss of partners or whatever their situations are. And we have these EAP programs in, you know, corporate land, which are usually used at the bottom of the frickin' cliff after the dynamics occurred, rather than from a proactive standpoint. You know, what would it be like if you actually had a wider depth and breadth within your employee assistant programs when things were going great, and that you had a cross section of people that could support people, not just when they're at the in some form of crisis. So in the context of healing, there's a document that I'm more than happy to share. I've gone into detail with reference to all the stages, the recommendations. I just think, conscious of time today, more than happy to share that document with you, AJ, and your audience. That speaks to anything you want to know about healing, my take on it, both at executive level and for any individual. It's about a 12-page PDF, PowerPoint. It rocks. And I think your audience would find that of benefit if they're interested in exploring what I would term, how do you integrate back into being whole and complete, rather than I need to go and get some healing.
Everyone's saying yes, please, and Facebook is going like, share. And I know in my own model, the 10-degree shift model that I work on with cultures and healing cultures, I actually talk about healing to organizations. They're starting to pick up the language, and a lot of my research is also based on the Blue Zone groups. And I noticed Pat said other cultures do grief and healing much better than us, and I couldn't agree more. You know, I've talked about before Okinawa in Japan. When children are born there, they're given a social circle of about 5 or 6 friends, and they stay in contact with those friends that they're allocated literally for their entire lives until they're over 100, and they might connect every single day. And so there's this immense healing going on all the time because they're actually not hiding from any of their shadows. They've got a group of people who hold them and talk to them every single day. So we do need co-creative communities of support, don't we, around us? It's got to be safe.
Especially now with COVID-19, you know, it's kind of like, have you as an executive of the organization interviewed all of your executive right now? How are you feeling? What's there for you? How do you feel I'm going? You know, how am I coming across? You know, what's in the way for you right now? You know, because usually as a leader, you're supposed to be super friggin' human all the time, and any form of frailty, you know, who the hell do you talk to? You know, because you're the one who's sorting everybody else out, supposedly, you know. So I think now more than ever, you know, Brene Brown's been one of the best advocates for vulnerability in the workplace. It's actually one of your biggest strengths, not a weakness. And, you know, I'm just an advocate to have the conversations, courageous conversations all the time, 24/7. It's just a friggin' conversation, but let's have it, you know, as a collective, you know.
Absolutely. Someone's asking on Facebook, do you have a podcast, Sally? I've not.
I've been off the radar for a while, and I'm just coming back. I've led a leadership panel in the States last week. I've got another leadership panel next week. I've got 2 more opportunities in the US. A lot of it I'm doing up in the US, not here in New Zealand or Australasia. That being said, I take note of what that person has said, and I dare say people start hearing a bit more from me moving forward.
And one of the great things is this recording will be converted into a podcast as well, because we're creating a Superhuman podcast, Michelle and I, which will be launched in a few weeks. So you'll at least get to listen to this again, particularly because Sally is so fast and you have a lot of information coming at you really quickly. You'll be able to put it on replay and listen in again. Any other final questions, everyone? Any other final questions? Everyone's saying your voice is empowering. They love your books. Liz had a point she was querying. She doesn't like the word silencing. Could you acknowledge your inner critic or shadow?
Oh, good. So totally hear it. So totally get the context. Every piece of language has 2 contextual meanings. So there's the empowered aspect of silencing and the disempowered aspect of silencing. The one I'm talking about is the empowered aspect of silencing, because just acknowledging it doesn't silence it. And to me, I'm not interested in you managing your inner critic, coordinating yourself around your inner critic. I'm interested in you completely silencing it so that you no longer have you don't hear it, so you don't have to manage it. You don't have to coordinate yourself around it. You know, complete. I mean, I've worked with elite athletes, and you know, they've got heinous inner critics. They've actually used their inner critic. They don't want to lose their inner critic because it's been the reason why they've achieved that elite level of performance. I come in and I go, but there actually is another way. Totally acknowledge that you found a medium to excel and achieve, but there are other ways of being able to achieve that elite level of performance without beating the crap out of yourself.
Right. And that's that coach to cause, not symptom in a way, because if we're still just trying to manage the inner critic, we're just sitting it there, aren't we? And we're walking around it or over or under it rather than blasting it out of the water.
Without a doubt. So as far as your listeners are concerned, those that are interested in wanting to hear more outside of today, more than happy. I've got about 30 free videos, about 3 minutes long, on a plethora and cross-section of, more than happy to share that. They can just PM me. So the only social media platform I use is LinkedIn. So they can private message me direct. I can give them access to that link. If you go onto LinkedIn, I write articles on a weekly basis, Evolving Leadership Consciousness on a Wednesday and Mindset Mastery on a Thursday. So anything of a leadership mindset nature, quite a body vault of content on LinkedIn. And I don't have a website, but LinkedIn profile, that's where my medium is for people to approach me.
Fantastic. So everyone, I have put a link in there for Sally on LinkedIn here in this chat group, and so did others. And we've also done that in the Facebook group where there's loads of people. It's going off again with the love hearts and likes. People are saying, love this, Sally. I feel like I'm going to nod my head off. Lots of people saying, someone saying I need to learn LinkedIn. Okay, you better get across there quickly. Thank you, Pat, as well, for your affirmation and heart-filled space today. Please do link in with Sally and with Michelle and I on LinkedIn, because that's how we stay in touch with the world as well. Thank you all for your interaction and your involvement here today, both in Facebook land and here in Zoom. It's been fantastic. So glad that you have really been inspired. Eve saying, yeah, awesome facilitating, been really inspiring. Our next speaker's on in an hour's time, and that's Julia Steele. So I hope to see some of you then when I talk to Julia Steele. Until then, Sally, any final words you want to share?
Love to. So people, thank you very much. Feel very privileged that you've spent the time today. And what I want to leave you with is, one, an apology, because I'm not a Facebook user. I'm not on Facebook. I'm sorry, but I am on LinkedIn. The thing I want to leave you with is, moment by moment by moment, you have a choice on what you feed. So the mantra that I live by it and highly recommend it. Is everything that you're thinking forwarding your game? If it's not, don't think it. Is everything that you're doing forwarding your game? If it's not, don't do it. Is everything you're saying forwarding your game? If it's not, don't say it. And is everything in who you're being forwarding your game? If it's not, don't be that. So you need to know what your game is, both personally and professionally. Now, training yourself to that degree of integrity, that takes something. To reach that level of unconscious competency, or what it means to be self-actualized, that's been a lifelong journey for me, but being able to partner people to reach that level of proficiency. Think, do, say, be forward in the game. You have a choice on what you think, do, say, and be. So if there's anything I want to leave you with, training yourself, it becomes quite funny. Get a sense of humor, people, because SSD is not something that you want to live with. SSD is serious significancy and drama, which is a function of the default identity. So being able to die to SSD is a really good thing. Being able to be the observer from an equanimous standpoint and be able to get a goddamn sense of humor in your adult to be able to move forward is priceless. Priceless. It's been an absolute joy contributing today.
Oh, loved it. Thank you so much for coming in. I always love co-creating with you. I always love the wisdom bombs and the thought bombs that I get from you. I think there's been so many quotable quotes. I don't know about others, but even though I was managing the chat group, I still wrote this many notes. So just so much gold there. Thank you all very much. Make sure you tune in later. You can watch the replay in Facebook for those of you who weren't sure of the group. It's called the SuperHuman Summit. So go across there, ask to be let in. We'll let you in. There's over 600 people playing in that group now and chatting crazily. Also link with Sally, that side of me, on LinkedIn. Make sure you check out her articles. They really are thought-provoking, and there's a lot of depth in her articles. This is not just superficial. Here's the start with why thing for today. She has got so much depth in what she's offering, as I know you've all seen, and she's super fast. So at least in LinkedIn, you can pause, reflect, reread again. Thanks, Sally. I'll see everyone on the next Zoom in an hour's time. Bye for now.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Take care.